ladies and gentlemen, it really is a privilege, and I say that and I truly mean it, to have Ron DeSantis, the Republican running for governor of Florida, on this program. I've been a fan of his since the day he was elected. I watched him work in the House of Representatives. He is solid. He has enormous integrity. He's an Iraq vet. He's a very smart guy, graduated from Harvard, and he's still smart. And he's taken the lead on so many issues that are important to this country. Ron DeSantis, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. You know, I watched this debate last night with your opponent, Gillum, and I got to say this before we get into substance. He is a very nasty guy. I mean, he turns to you. He must have called you a liar 20 times. He just said some incredibly snarky things, and I thought to myself, this guy's cocky. He thinks that he has it in the bag, and I suspect he does not. I mean, what did you make of the debate?
Well, look, I think that whole performance was really beneficial for me. I mean, you know, when you're running for governor, Mark, obviously, you know, voters are going to look to see, you know, do they agree with vision or not? And so I'm somebody who's running on keeping Florida a low-tax state. He wants a massive tax. Law enforcement, he's running saying that we should abolish ICE. And so there are different, obviously huge policy differences. But in the governor's race, instead of like a Senate or a House race, it's more than just about your positions. It's about leadership and who could actually do the job. And I think his antics just showed that he's not somebody that would be a good governor, even apart from his radical left-wing ideology. So I think his whole performance backfired. I think a lot of people that tuned in looked at me, and they obviously now get a sense of my biography, my service to the country. And I just think that the easy decision is that I'm just a better leader than Gillum.
One of the things that's very, very troubling to me, knowing you now for several years, you led the fight in the House of Representatives to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital when nobody thought it would go anywhere. You led the fight in the House of Representatives pressing for moving the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. You succeeded, along with the president, along with our wonderful ambassador Friedman and so forth. And then for him and his party to suggest that you're supported by neo-Nazis when in fact you're the biggest voice for the state of Israel in the United States House of Representatives, my jaw hit the floor.
Well, I think it was so ridiculous that I think voters just laughed that off. I mean, give me a break. And this is from a guy who actually opposes having our embassy in Jerusalem. He opposes recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and he's been endorsed by this radical left-wing group, the Dream Defenders, and he actually signed a pledge to the group saying he would support this radical manifesto they have. And this group, Dream Defenders, one of their main things is boycotting Israel, BDS. They say Israel's a genocidal apartheid state. So that's the group he stands with. He will not disavow this group because that is who he is. And actually just today there was a group of, we had 38 sheriffs in Florida write Gillum a letter asking him to disavow the Dream Defenders because the pledge that Gillum signed said that police and prisons have no place in justice. They want to abolish basically traditional law enforcement, defund it, and then spend the money on welfare programs. It's very radical stuff. It's dripping with hatred for our men and women in law enforcement, and it's just totally unacceptable. And Gillum, he will not budge. I mean, he's sticking by that, and that's just unacceptable for us. So yeah, for him to say that, I think it was a total farce. And that's the thing. Voters are sick of people on the left just lashing out like that at folks. And I think it really backfired big time.
You know, when you sign a petition, you know, you're putting your signature to it, so there's no confusion. And he signs a petition in favor of boycotting Israel. He signs a petition in favor of moving police officers out of prisons. And more than that, as you pointed out, but I don't think the moderator quite comprehended what you were saying, you're talking about, he says, abolish ICE and move it under the Justice Department. I don't know how that changes anything, moving ICE from one building to another building, as somebody who served as chief of staff to the Attorney General. His problem is He rejects law enforcement.
Exactly.
And your point was this. Once a criminal alien serves time in a state prison in Florida, the door is open and they're either turned over to the feds who deport them or they come into your neighborhood. And he supports that person going into your neighborhood and not being deported. Isn't that basically his position?
Yeah, I asked him on Sunday night's debate at CNN, will you honor a detainer request? They're called detainers when the federal government wants to take a criminal illegal coming out of prison. Will you honor a detainer request from Donald Trump's ICE agency? He would not say he would do that. And so, he's going to say, I don't want criminals on the street. But the fact of the matter is he's pledged not to cooperate with ICE. And this idea that all he wants to do is move it under the Justice Department, Mark, that's him trying to backtrack off his position. When he was running ads in the primary saying abolish ICE because they want open borders. That's what the far left wants. And he was playing to that base. So the idea that all he wants to do is like an administrative tweak, he's lying when he says that. He wants to abolish the agency because he doesn't want immigration enforcement.
Now, when we come back after the bottom of the hour, Ron DeSantis, by the way, what is your website, Ron?
RonDeSantis.com.
All right, we're going to put it up on my social sites. Ladies and gentlemen, Ron's being big time outspent. This guy has Soros behind him. He's got Steyer behind him. All the left-wing billionaires and left-wing groups, they're targeting Florida. They know if they take Florida, it's going to be very difficult to win the presidency in the future. And they're getting behind a true Bernie Sanders, George Soros, People for the American Way, which is who he works for, radical. And when we come back, I want to ask Ron DeSantis, there's an FBI investigation that's been taking place in Tallahassee where this guy was mayor, and Mr. Gillum's connection to it. And there is a connection to it. We'll be right back. Hugely important governor's race in Florida that affects the whole nation. It's the third most populated state. And, of course, the left would love nothing more than to control the governorship and to control what takes place in that state prior to the 2020 election, as they would Texas. And it's very important, this race that's taking place in Florida. And the Democrat is about as radical left as you can get. And the left all over the country is pouring millions and millions of dollars into this, including billionaires, who are the usual suspects. Ron DeSantis, who I've strongly endorsed. Ron DeSantis, Tallahassee is a very corrupt government under this mayor. There has been a long-going FBI investigation, as I understand it. And even the mayor himself, that is, the man who wishes to be governor, Andrew Gillum, he got caught up in this. What exactly happened?
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. So he has a very close relationship with several lobbyists who were lobbying the city government to get basically city money to build a project. They wanted $2 million. And so what these lobbyists did is they arranged a number of excursions, one of which was to New York City. And along for the ride on that was a undercover FBI agent who had kind of infiltrated. He was posing as a contractor trying to do business with the city. But this guy got Andrew during that trip a $1,000 ticket to go see the play Hamilton. I mean, people hear about these Hamilton tickets. They think it's like going to see a movie. The tickets were at least $1,000 at that time. And so he gave it to Andrew. Andrew knew that. Andrew's lied about that, but now there's been evidence that shows that. But then those same lobbyists also arranged a luxury 4-night stay in this Costa Rica villa, which ended up costing about $1,000 for Andrew and his wife, in addition to some other folks. And again, Andrew didn't pay for that. And then what happens after all this, Mark? Lo and behold, Mayor Andrew Gillum turns around and he gives those lobbyists the $2 million deal that they were looking for. And so Andrew was getting things that he shouldn't have had that did violate Florida ethics laws. And then the lobbyists got exactly what they were paying for. And so that's really the way Tallahassee government runs. It's corrupt. It's wrong. Andrew has, he lied to the country on Sunday night when I confronted him about this, but then documents came out almost immediately that refuted his denial, showed he was lying, and he's basically tried to blame everyone he can because he just refuses to take responsibility. But the bottom line is he still to this day tries to say he's not under investigation. But Mark, you're very smart in the law. You understand this stuff. would an FBI agent ever act undercover and give somebody a potential bribe like that if they weren't investigating the public official? That'd be the only reason you would do such a thing.
Of course, and nobody knows if he's in the clear now or not. Nobody knows if this is an ongoing investigation of, among other people, him.
No, it's definitely an ongoing investigation. I mean, that much is for sure. It's interesting. We ran an ad basically talking about all this problem, and his attorney wrote a cease and desist letter to these stations. And in the letter, the attorney said, public reports have said that Andrew is not the subject of the investigation. But as you know, Mark, some of these buzzwords, you can be a subject of an investigation. You can also be a target of the investigation. His own campaign attorney did not put in that letter that Andrew is not a target. He just said Andrew's not a subject. So that, to me, is an interesting omission, because the bottom line is, why would they be investigating corruption in City Hall if it had nothing to do with the mayor? You wouldn't have had those FBI agents around him on these trips like they were on.
And Ron DeSantis, he immediately tried to racialize this issue, that the reason you were bringing it up, and for that matter, I guess local media is bringing it up, is because of his race. Now, last time I checked, it has nothing to do with somebody's race when there's an undercover agent giving somebody a value to try and see if they'll take it, and he took it. It has nothing to do with race. And I notice he's tried to do this over and over and over again in this campaign. Let me ask you a question. Your running mate, who is your running mate?
Her name is Jeanette Nunez. She's a state representative from Miami.
She's a Cuban-American?
Cuban-American, and when we get elected, she'll be the highest-ranking female Hispanic in the history of Florida government.
Mm-hmm. I notice the media doesn't talk much about that.
No, of course not. But I'll tell you, with Andrew lashing out like this, I mean, when you start talking about corruption, people understand it ain't about black or white. It's about right versus wrong. And if you're using this office to feather your own nest like Andrew did, then that's a problem. It's interesting, Mark, though, it wasn't just the illegal stuff that he's done. When he was on the Tallahassee City Commission, he did vote to raise property taxes on people, but he also voted to increase his own retirement benefits by tens of thousands of dollars, basically doubling his pay. And so he wanted people of Tallahassee to pay more, and he wanted some of that to go directly into his pocket. So he's always been a self-dealing politician, whether it's legal votes like that, which are corrupt anyways, or illegal activity like accepting the Hamilton ticket and turning around and giving these guys the deal they wanted.
And he worked for this group, People for American Way. Is that correct?
Yeah, and here's the thing about that. That's a very ultra-liberal group. So if you look at People for the American Way's filings, they say they pay Andrew Gillum, this is while he's mayor, $130,000 a year to work 40 hours a week. Well, the mayor of Tallahassee is a full-time job. So how the hell is he working 40 hours a week for People for the American Way? So one of two things are true. Either he is actually doing that, in which case he's neglecting the people of Tallahassee, which may explain why they had the highest number of murders in the history of the city last year and have one of the most, they have the highest crime rate in Florida, or he ain't working 40 hours a week, and that's all just a fraud, and he's basically accepting money without performing services. So one or the other is problematic, no matter which way you slice it.
Wait, I'm a little confused, and I bet the nation is, and the Floridians are too. You can be mayor and have a side job with a group like People for the American Way, founded by Norman Lear out of Hollywood, and earn $140,000 on the side?
Well, yeah, and I think that the question is People for the American Way said that was in exchange for him working 40 hours a week. I think he probably wasn't doing 40 hours a week. I think they were just trying to funnel money to him. But if he was working 40 hours a week to them, how does that make the people of Tallahassee feel? You know, they have this out-of-control crime problem. He's raising their taxes. He's doing all these things, and yet he's working for these left-wing groups. So it's a problem either way. But it's interesting. Even though those documents are out there, journalists do not pursue that at all. I mean, if I walk on the wrong side of the sidewalk, you know, they try to do different stories on me. So it's definitely a double standard. I mean, it's an obvious question that should be investigated by the press.
I want to hit two other things before you go, and that is health care and taxes. He has talked about Medicare for all. This is the big left-wing push, Medicare for all. And it's been pointed out, Medicare for all means everyone on Medicare loses Medicare. Everyone on an private employer health care plan loses their private employer health care plan. Every union member whose union has negotiated a health care plan, they will lose their health care plan. Everybody will lose the health care that they have now with some theory, some abstraction, some concoction they'll create where Washington, D.C. will have this iron-fisted system, whether you like it or not. Whatever you have today disappears. And what is his response to this? That he would eliminate all existing health care plans for everybody that's on them, including Medicare.
One little correction, Mark. It eliminates, I think, for about 300 million people, the two things that Bernie's bill keeps are the VA and the Indian Health Service. So I guess that means that Elizabeth Warren has a 1,000% chance to keep her health care if they do this. But bottom line is right. So his responses when I called him out on this was basically to act like he didn't know what I was talking about. He was running commercials saying single-payer health, Medi-Cal for all 2 months ago. But he realizes that is toxic in Florida because we have senior citizens who have their arrangements. They've been paying into Medicare. They have Medicare Advantage, these programs. We have obviously millions of people who earn their health benefits through their employer, through their employment. And he would take all of that away. You have no choice. You get dumped, just as you said, dumped on a single payer, which we know will cause tax increases. It will bankrupt us. It'll hemorrhage money, and so they'll have to ration. And so, yeah, you may have the right to have all this great stuff, but you're not going to find a doctor that's going to be able to perform that. There'll be waiting lines, and we know the drill on all that. So that is not popular once people know what it is. And so basically he's just tried to run away from it as much as he can, even though in the primary he was saying that that's the way that you win in Florida. So we're going to keep reminding voters that
Let's talk about.
Yep.
Let's hit taxes now. I mean, one of the reasons a lot of people come to Florida from these blue states is you don't have an income tax. And that's also one of the reasons you have such a dynamic economy and such a diverse economy in Florida. And I have a home in Florida, so I've seen the difference between a no tax income tax state, and I have a home and my primary residence in Virginia, and an income tax state. I cannot believe with all the proposals he's making. He says, I've never supported a state income tax. That's what these guys do. I saw it in Connecticut years ago and so forth. Though I'm not in favor. And then they push the spending and the debt. And then either they push for an income tax or some court orders an income tax. He supports an income tax in truth, doesn't he?
So there was a study done, a nonpartisan study that analyzed all his spending proposals. And the conclusion of this study was, in order to make it work, he would either need to do one of two things: have a statewide sales tax of 38%, or impose a state income tax, which could reach as high as 35%. So those are the only two realistic routes where he would be able to pay for, because, he wants to pay for single-payer health care. He wants to pay for free college. He wants to do all this other stuff. And that's what it would cost. So you go down that road, Florida is done economically. I mean, it would totally cripple our economy and cripple our state. And we obviously can't let that happen at all.
$15 minimum wage. Seattle tried it. It's been a complete failure. All these cities that try it, what they wind up doing is the people who are earning minimum wage or low wages, they're the ones who are punished. Because what happens is people get fired. Small restaurants can't afford it. Even chains can't afford it. And so the price of food goes up. Less people go into these outlets and go into these places. And people lose jobs. They lose tips. I mean, this doesn't help people actually mandating a $15 minimum wage when it has this consequence, does it?
So, Mark, I started off blue-collar kid. I had to work 40 hours a week before I got to college. I worked all these jobs for $6 an hour through college. I wouldn't have been able to get through without that. And if Gillum's policies were in place, I would not have made $15 an hour. I would have made $0 because I would not have had the opportunity for any of those jobs. And so what he will do is he will put hundreds of thousands of people out of work. He will cause businesses to shut down, businesses to leave the state. But here's the thing, Mark, the Seattle thing you mentioned, a lot of the people who kept their jobs and did get a pay increase to 15, they still ended up with less take-home pay because their hours got reduced by the business. So it's really been counterproductive. And All the evidence points that way, but yet he's a left-wing ideologue, so he doesn't care, and this is what he's running on.
It's particularly harmful to young people who are trying to get their first job, particularly harmful in minority communities, people trying to get their first job. Same with his open borders policies. It particularly harms no-skilled or low-skilled, unskilled or low-skilled individuals. But he claims to represent these people, but his policies crush these people. Ron DeSantis, once again, what is your site? America, we have a LEVIN surge. Let's give all the support we can to Ron DeSantis. In Florida, let's increase his ground game there and the grassroots there. Where do people go if they want to help you?
RonDeSantis.com, RonDeSantis.com. We would love to have your support. We can't let socialism take root in Florida.
All right, my friend. Good luck to you. Take care of yourself.
All right, Mark. God bless.
God bless. You know, a few years back, when I backed Ted Cruz in a primary that nobody thought he could win, I told you I know Ted Cruz personally. He's the real deal. I'm telling you, America, Ron DeSantis is the real deal. I'm telling you, Floridians, Ron DeSantis is the real deal. The problem is, so is Andrew Gillum. It's Americanism versus socialism, ladies and gentlemen. It couldn't be clearer in the state of Florida. Couldn't be clearer in the state of Texas. Couldn't be clearer in the state of Georgia and a number of these other states. The state of Arizona. I remember when the Democrat Party was a rational party. I didn't always agree with it. But there were individuals, Scoop Jackson, Zell Miller, individuals like that. Now, the stars of the Democrat Party are radicals. They're extremists. Extremists. That's who's running for governor on the Democrat side in Florida. That's who's running for governor on the Democrat side in Texas. That's who's running for for senator on the Democrat side in Arizona. That's who's running for governor on the Democrat side in Georgia. These radicals, these extremists, who will absolutely obliterate the success of these states, what these states stand for. If an ideologue like Gillum has his way, he will turn Florida into New York. He will turn Florida into California. If you want that kind of government, then go get it. But why do you have to destroy all these actually properly functioning states? People are voting with their feet. These blue states are depopulating. Every single blue state is depopulating. And then you have several of these red states where the populations are booming. And there's a reason for it. Because in our country, people can vote with their feet. And they're leaving New York and New Jersey and Illinois and California for places like Florida and Texas. So why destroy Texas? Ron DeSantis for governor, ladies and gentlemen, Florida. Please give him all the support you can. RonDeSantis.com. We salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, and emergency personnel, and all of you. I'll see you tomorrow. God bless.